All right, everybody, we will call this meeting to order of the Community Development Committee. And Thomas, let's start over on the left-hand side, if we could, and do introductions.
Sure thing. Thomas Hill, United Way of Cass Clay.
Ken Enixon, Member at Large.
Sam McDonald, Member at Large.
Michael Ruthinger, Assistant Administrator.
Jim Johnson, Fargo School Board.
Linda Klebe, Member at Large.
That's good timing.
Good timing, thank you.
John Gunkelman, Fargo Planning Commission.
Thanks, everybody. Today's agenda will be a lot of updates for us, and we've had a lot of activities unfolding and going on, so we're going to catch ourselves up today with several of these topics. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Jim, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Sam. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? And Mayor Mahoney has just joined us. Thank you, Mayor, for joining us. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes from the last meeting? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion because they look good to me.
Moved to by Jim, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ken. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, we'll continue reaching out to the public if there's anybody in the audience that would like to address community development today. Anybody at all? Okay. We'll continue on to our next topic, which is an update on the Community Land Trust.
I think I'll just present from here, and then I'll go see if April needs any assistance setting up, or if you're good. But I just wanted to introduce April Walker. She's with the FM Area Foundation. Of course, many of you will know from her with her work with the City of Fargo. But I'll let her introduce herself in her role with the FM Area Foundation and the Community Land Trust. As you know, over the course of the last year, and Michael Ruthinger, Commissioner Strand, and Mayor have engaged in conversations with the FM Area Foundation, and they've brought on a consultant to dig in deeper to how the community can respond to community land trusts and our role at the City of Fargo as well as we support that. So staff met with April a couple of weeks ago, and we thought this would be perfect timing to have a brief update for you. So April, do you have what you need to?
It's loaded. I don't know how to.
Yeah.
And April, it's just terrific to see you here in City Hall.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We miss you here.
In the old city hall, you know how to run everything.
That's right. Right. Brand new. All right. Do I need to do anything with the microphone, or are we good? I see it's red, so good, right? Okay. Thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate it. I am here today representing the FM Area Foundation, as Nicole said. I am a board member with the FM Area Foundation. And so I'm here to tell you a little bit about how the Area Foundation got involved with the development of a community land trust here in this community, and give you a little bit of a status update on what we've been doing and tell you about our path forward. So with that, this all sort of began with the regional workforce study that was conducted back in 2015 is when that report was finalized. That report indicated that there were, at that time, about 6,700 jobs to fill in our community, and it estimated that by 2020, there would be 30,000 jobs that would need to be filled, some of that being just turnover in the community, but all in all, we'd be looking to fill about 30,000 positions. The study at that time indicated that for many workers, affordable housing, childcare, and transportation were significant barriers to employment within the community. Outgrowths of that study are that the FM Area Foundation was really assigned the priority of working on the housing issue. The focus for us has been wage earners that are between $15 to $30 an hour. And we've kind of built what we're doing around the recommendation from the workforce study. Those recommendations included a topic called Build. Under the topic of Build, it was discussed that we needed to develop a framework for financial independence and upward mobility for workers in low-wage, basic skill jobs, and that there needed to be an increase in access and supply of affordable housing. We partnered with Essentia Health. Essentia was kind enough to provide some data analysis to us free of charge. The work that they did showed us that the median household income for this community is between $50,000 and $56,000. So in Fargo, it's about $50,000, and on the Moorhead side, it's about $56,000. The average housing cost in the area is between $195,000 and $269,000. And so to be able to afford that level of housing, you really need to earn $20.10 an hour or more. And that's based on the assumption that you would be spending about 1/3 of your income on that housing. One way we discovered to try and increase the supply of affordable housing is to develop a community land trust. So the FM Area Foundation, back in August of 2018, approved the use of $100,000 of their money through their local impact investing fund to investigate the development of a Cass Clay Community Land Trust. They incorporated the Community Land Trust and created an interim board of directors. The interim board of directors was set up as the local impact investing committee of the Area Foundation. So it was really made up of board of directors for the Area Foundation, a subgroup of them. We then went out and found some expertise, and Burlington and Associates is a group that has worked with multiple land trusts across the country. They made us aware that there are about 300 of them out there that are successful, and we brought them on board and are currently in what we call phase 1 of a study with them. The phase 1 study was to create a feasibility study and to create a 5-year business plan for our Cass Clay Community Land Trust. There is a potential for phase 2 if our Area Foundation is satisfied that it is feasible and decides to move forward. We will move into phase 2, which is an additional $24,000 worth of cost, but would get us much further down the line to having the documents in place that would be necessary to function as a land trust. So what is a community land trust? This graphic is intended to try to convey that to you. It's really what we would call a shared equity model. So you have a renter, you want to convert that renter to a homeowner. Unfortunately, they're unable to purchase a house at the current market rate on their own. And so they bring what they can afford in a mortgage to the table, and the land trust brings additional funding to the table to buy down the mortgage cost. Once that arrangement is made and the house is purchased, they are the homeowner and the land trust owns the land underneath. A lease is entered into with that homeowner that allows them to occupy and use the property as any other homeowner would use the property. They maintain and take care of it, and at some point in the future when they're ready to sell that property, the CLT has the option to buy it back from them. We have a right of first refusal, if you will. When the owner sells, as a part of the ground lease, there's been a formula put together that says you will get back all of the equity that you put into it, plus you will get a portion of any appreciation that has occurred over the life of your ownership. The remainder of the appreciation stays with the property. And so in this way, you're helping to build their personal wealth at the time of the resale. They get to walk away with everything they put into it. And at the same time, you're creating affordable housing stock by not raising the cost of that structure to market rates when you resell it. Because you've taken a share of the appreciation as a land trust, you can offer it at an affordable rate to an eligible buyer for a second time around. So again, the homeowner purchased the home at an affordable price, leases the underlying land from the community land trust, and that ground lease specifies the resale formula and appreciation, providing for the long-term affordability. Through the process of working with our developer, our consultant, we have come up with a couple of scenarios. The first one that he gave to us was an option that would have put forth 250 houses in a 5-year period. Quite frankly, we looked at that and we thought it was aggressive. It would have required over $12 million in asset subsidies in addition to an operational subsidy for the CLT in order to make it work. And it just seemed like it would have been a very aggressive method. And so we had many conversations with different agencies in the community. We've spoken with the City of Fargo. We spoke with the City of West Fargo. We spoke with Dilworth, both Cass and Clay counties. We've had conversations with groups like Habitat for Humanity and many other interested parties. And through that process of having these conversations, we learned a lot from them. And we used that information to refine the scenario that was on the table. And so what we're currently looking at is 105 homes in a 5-year period. The idea behind this is that year number 1, being 2020, we would seek to provide 10 homes. And again, the idea being if we are successful in putting 10 homeowners into land trust properties, that gives us something to talk about and helps us generate the buzz that's necessary to do the additional fundraising to support the future years of work. So here we're showing year 1 in 2020, we would bring 10 homes on. In 2021, you'd bring 15 homes on. In 2022, the goal would be 25. In 23, the goal would be 25. And 24, 30 homes for a total of 105 homes. You can see that the total subsidy required to accomplish that for the asset portion is just over $5 million. When you move down to the next part of that graphic, you can see what the operating budget would be, or at least is what it's assumed to be. And over the 5-year period, it would require about $329,000 for operations. Once you start to build an inventory of houses in your program, there is a nominal fee, something that's typically around a $50 a month fee for that landowner for that lease. So that's a portion of revenue that comes back to the land trust to help offset those operational costs going into the future. You can see here that at the end of this 5-year period, we still have a deficit where there's about $700,000 that would have to be raised to support the operating costs. Your ultimate goal when you put a land trust together, because you're entering into ground leases that are 99 years in their term, is to create a sustainable organization that can be there to manage each of those transitions when homeowners choose to sell, and to provide them assistance in learning things about financial education, how to maintain their property. We call that ARM stewardship. So you want to get to the point where you are stewardship sustainable, so that by just collecting the ground leases, you would be able to support your operations, whether you ever put another home into your portfolio or not, right? That's your goal. Clearly, this 5-year plan does not get you there, but this 5-year plan is a good roadmap to start down the trail to that sustainability. We believe that in this community, ultimately, we would need somewhere around 350 homes to reach stewardship sustainability. But we're quite comfortable that with 105 homes in the portfolio, we would have the opportunity to continue to operate whether or not we provided additional homes. So just some background information for you there. So again, we've got a 5-year plan with about $5.8 million in subsidy that would create 105 homes. What is the benefit of this plan? Well, with just the 105 homes, if you never built another land trust home after that 5-year period, and you look at the 30-year normal length of a mortgage, with homes turning over approximately every 7 years, they're the same in land trust homes as they are in fair market homes, you would expect to be able to serve something around 450 families over that 30-year period. In addition, with each turnover of the home, there's less money that has to go into it because you've created that affordability and sustained that affordability going forward of the sale value. So the average subsidy for each of those 450 homes becomes $12,500, excuse me, over the life of that 30-year mortgage. So clearly showing that this is something that has a benefit to the community, even at the 105 home scale. So our path forward, we are, like we said, in the midst of doing a feasibility study. What I just shared with you are a couple of scenarios that have been drafted. The actual deliverable from the consultant will be a much more detailed report that has more information for us. You've got about the 30,000-foot view in that last slide. We'll have a lot more information to share with our Area Foundation Board in August. At that point, it'll be up to the Area Foundation Board to decide whether or not they want to proceed and move forward as the sponsor of the land trust. If they choose to go to phase 2, then our consultant would provide assistance to us in developing ground lease terms, a stewardship program, and an idea about what the operating rules, who would qualify for these homes, would be developed through that process. In addition, in 2020, it would be our goal to hire a full-time staff person, and one of the focuses of that staff person would be to find additional funding and to start to create the inventory of homes. So that's what we've been working on. We're very grateful that the City of Fargo has been a partner. We're looking forward to John Strand just joined our board. Just got the invitation this week, so we're very grateful that he's going to be giving of his time to help move us forward, and I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Anybody questions, comments? Do you have something?
Well, I know in some previous iterations when you shared with the Neighborhood Coalition, it sounded like the idea was you were going to set up a separate entity.
Right?
Is that still the?
That is still the intention. The Area Foundation, really when we first looked at this, we were thinking we could incorporate, put together the business plan and kick them out the door and they'd be sustainable within 2 years, right? Well, again, the data that came back from our consultant said to get to that stewardship sustainability point is probably a little farther down the line. And so our board is going to have to make a decision. And right now, our discussion is sort of centering around it's probably okay to give them a 5-year plan and get them 2 years of funding maybe, and a 5-year plan, and push them out the door with the understanding that they've got a roadmap to get to stewardship sustainability. So those are decisions that the Area Foundation Board will have to make. Once we get to that point, though, of the Area Foundation sort of stepping back, the board becomes 1/3 residents who live in the homes, 1/3 other individuals who live in the community, and 1/3 technical experts that continue to assist to move the CLT forward.
And I suppose that the phase 2 would be when the foundation determines how much you would be investing or into this effort, I'm assuming, as far as on the fundraising side?
So the foundation has put forth the $100,000 right now to do the study. That's our initial investment that we've committed to, and that's the only thing that they've committed to so far.
Right. Okay.
However, now I get to put my board hat on, take the CLT hat off. The Area Foundation has about $80 million in assets and has done a lot of wonderful work in the community. They provide a lot of grants to different nonprofit organizations. In addition to that, they have an arm that's called Local Impact Investing. And the Local Impact Investing is about $1.2 million right now that they have each year to provide low-interest loans to help projects that have a socially minded aspect to them. And so we kind of see the CLT as a potential future client of the Local Impact Investing arm of the Area Foundation.
When you did the financials, April, there is a consideration that the city of Fargo may have some land, one that we would not necessarily charge you for, would put in the land trust. And then there's also the potential on a TIF that if we take some TIF money, we could purchase some lots. If that was in the financial, wouldn't your finances look even better?
Absolutely. Again, what we've done here is we've not tried to pre-guess where the money's going to come from. We've just tried to determine the magnitude of the need so that we could then work with our partners to figure out where it's going to come from. But we've had numerous conversations, and each community has a little bit different take on it. City of Fargo, as an example, we've had the conversation that there's the potential for $50,000 a year from the City of Fargo through CDBG or other resources that you have. Well, in West Fargo, they don't have that type of resource. So they're looking at, is there potential to use their economic development funds, that they have a sales tax, and potentially go that route. In addition, we've tried to help the staffs of the different agencies identify the advantages. What problems do the different organizations have that a CLT could help to solve? So the idea of a TIF, like you mentioned, perhaps you have a large-scale developer come in that's bought up a block of homes and is capturing the tax increment differential to buy down the cost of their development. Well, there's a possibility that at that time you could make the decision that a portion of those proceeds should go back to the adjacent neighborhood to help stabilize blocks that you want to stabilize so that they don't turn over, and a portion of those proceeds should go to the developer. So we've had numerous conversations, and there's lots of ideas. We think there's going to be all kinds of opportunity to be creative and come up with some solutions in our communities.
Thomas?
Maybe, April, in line with that, so when you're talking about 105 homes, is it the construction of 105 homes on 105 different parcels, or could there be co-located properties, or like if you had one larger parcel, and again, maybe it goes into line what you were just speaking about, can you use, like if an organization or if a person wanted to sell their home, could they sell it to the land trust, or do you have to find 105 lots to build homes, I
No,
guess?
and that's actually a really great question, and I thank you for bringing that up. One of the easiest ways for us, the softest entry, if you will, into being a land trust is going to be to go out and find existing homes that are on the market in our price range, and to work with the potential buyer to close the deal, right? And that will help us build an inventory, start our portfolio. We don't think there's enough homes out there on the market for us to do that 105 times in the next 5 years. So we do recognize that we are going to have to partner with developers and others to put together some projects. We are not talking just single-family homes. We are leaving open the option of doing condoed units, of doing twin homes, of doing row homes, whatever's appropriate for the context that we're dealing with at the time. So,
Jim, did you have something? Oh, sorry. Oh, John.
April, a quick question. How far, they've started this in Grand Forks, haven't they?
yes, there is.
'Cause I know Tyrone came from
functioning
Grand
CLT.
Forks. How far along is their program?
Well, their program, I don't know a lot about their program, but I do know enough to know that it's structured very differently from what we're talking about. I believe that their program was set up in response to the disaster that occurred, and they had some very specific immediate needs that they addressed with their program. They have not, to my knowledge, they have not had a lot of growth, and they're not looking to grow very large. I think they are kind of a subset to an existing organization, and so they are subsidized in that way operationally so that they do not have the same pressures, if you will, to grow like we would have in the beginning here in this community.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, follow-up? April, this is just really great news. Folks that are new to the Community Development Committee, you might remember, for those who've been here, we voted on this topic November of 2017. And it seems like, at that time, we didn't know how far it would go, but the partnership that evolved naturally with the FM Area Foundation, and then their connection to United Way, and the issues in the context of the issues of workforce development, we've really got some traction here. What I'm excited about as I'm observing this is, I think we got ahead of ourselves. Rather than just going to Nicole's department and trying to create a land trust agency within our department, we've got not just Fargo, but we've got the region on both sides of the river, 2 states, multi-counties. So where you've taken this is just so terrific, your board and your leadership. I think it's going to have a great impact. And for folks out there looking for examples, maybe the granddaddy of all community land trust is Burlington, Vermont. I believe their housing stock for their land trust now is about 7% of the entire housing market. So in the context of affordable housing, accessible housing, you know, the ownership, you know, the role that you're going to have addressing workforce development needs, this is just a terrific partnership, and I think we all look forward to the city and you all putting our heads together and breathing life into this. Anybody else? Linda, do you have anything?
Well, I was just doing the math, and I think they can do it in 5 years. It's only 21 homes a year. And I think we need every approach to affordability. And the idea of doing something smaller, not necessarily single families, your cost per unit would go down.
I appreciate that, and I would want to be sure and point out that what we're talking about here is a 5-year plan and a goal. If there's more money available, we'll certainly take advantage of that and do more in a given year. So absolutely appreciate that.
Can private people help, and how?
We are going to be looking for help from private people. In fact, we've had a number of individuals in the community step forward and say, can I give now? And we're not quite there yet. Like I said, we still have to get through August, which is the decision by the board, the Area Foundation Board, as to it carrying forward or not. But there will be opportunities. We've had a developer offer us land. There will be opportunities for individual giving to support this. And so please stay tuned and look forward to hearing more from us on when those opportunities are available.
Anybody else? April, thank you very much, and extend our very sincere thanks to your board and to your leadership there. Okay. All right, we'll go on to our next topic. Nicole, there's an update on the Fargo-Moorhead area, or Fargo Housing and Redevelopment Authority?
Yes, I'll do a very brief update. I think initially when this was planned, we were going to ask Matt Pike, the Fargo Housing Regional Development Authority, their director, to present. But maybe just a quick few highlights on some properties they're working on. And as you know, the high-rise has been a discussion for a while, but they're working on a potential grant opportunity to restructure that facility and have a plan they're working on for working with the residents in terms of next stages. Since they're in discussion with the residents, I don't want to get in a whole lot of detail here. I don't have a whole lot of detail, and was hoping that Matt would be able to provide that information today. But we are in periodic discussions as city staff with the Housing Authority on some of their next steps. So I'm sure we'll get an update from them in more detail really quick, but they're working on a plan this summer that actually also includes what we call the SRO. It's a single room occupancy property. And this is the property right next door to the library, just to the south of the library across the street. And the city of Fargo actually owns that, but it has residences in there. We are actually in the process of, and we've had a long-term agreement with the Housing Authority to manage that property for us through a continuum of care grant through the Housing, from HUD, and a lot of acronyms here, sorry. And so at any case, long story short, there is a plan of action to take that offline for its immediate use based on some environmental concerns that have surfaced recently. And so we are working with the Housing Authority on that, and we'll have more updates for you. And then lastly, the Housing Authority does own a vacant piece of property on 42nd Street South, and that was acquired through CDBG monies. We're in beginning discussions with the Housing Authority on what development, new construction looks like for housing units. So I think in summary, I don't have a whole lot of detail, but what I'd like to start using this month, our monthly briefing for you, is giving you reports on how we're working towards affordable housing plans as it relates to our significant partner, the Fargo Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and then likewise as we learn of other properties as well as we work on. So look forward to a monthly update on that as a topic, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Nicole? All right, thank you, Nicole. Let's continue on to neighborhood updates.
Yep, so on this piece, and I think I'm actually it's going to be a little bit more comfortable when I stand near the microphone. So. Still getting used to the work of this room. So at any case, along those lines, we'd like to, I think we heard this from, as a request from the commission some time ago, but looking for routine neighborhood updates, if you will. And so as an example, we have 3 topics for this month. One, we've invited Ken Enochson on behalf of the Core Neighborhood Association to maybe provide some updates and insight and maybe points of interest on behalf of them. It's better for you to hear directly from them as opposed to staff as that liaison. And then item 7A, the overview of the TIF concept for the Roosevelt neighborhood. I believe Commissioner Strand, if you'd like, I can do a quick introduction on that topic, or also defer to Ken with his hat on the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association. Ken wears many different hats sitting on this commission, but would you like for staff to give a brief update on kind of that discussion item and how it's come about?
What would be your preference?
I can provide a quick overview, and then maybe Ken, if I get
Certainly.
anything wrong, and we also have Jim Leshkowitz in the audience as
That
well.
works.
But maybe as a brief update, just because you might have seen it in the newspaper and then also at the City Commission. As you know, the Roosevelt neighborhood had, we've been working for several years, and then most importantly this last year with the St. Paul Newman Center, Community Center, I'm getting that wrong, but basically with the Newman Center and Roars, faith-based housing, new market rate housing, and a student center for Catholic students. And this has been a complicated project as it sits on a full block within 12th Avenue North and University. And so through lots of conversation, there was a lot of public process that went through the Planning Commission and the City Commission, and lots of neighborhood updates, or lots of neighborhood conversation. That ultimately ended up being approved by the City Commission, which then led to the next stage where the developer has petitioned for application for TIF. Something new to this, and discussions with the City Commission and our strategic planning director, Jim Gilmore, worked on a package, if you will, of listening to the possibility of a TIF, working with the developer and the neighborhood. Would it make sense to capture some of that money and set that aside for neighborhood improvements? And under Century Code, there's only certain components that could be related, that could be used for that money, and that includes acquisition and demolition, and I believe. And so with that, that engaged in some discussion, quite honestly got a little confusing at the City Commission level. And so that discussion, I'm not sure the current status of that. Jim Gilmore has been leading that with Jim Roars. But alongside that, though, there was a lot of neighborhood engagement and discussion. The Roosevelt neighborhood, when approached with this question, and if they wanted have this discussion, use this opportunity to kind of re-clarify their concerns on this project overall, and weren't so necessarily gung-ho about this idea. While they do support city investment in the neighborhood, they didn't want to necessarily get construed with this incentive, if you will, and its relationship to a new development when we look at the primary goals of, again, I don't want to speak for the neighborhood, but preservation and development. So pardon me if I've got anything incorrect, Ken, but so herein lies our current status, which as the planning director, I'm honestly in an unknown factor of where it sits today. And I believe the TIF application was forwarded on to our financial advisors. I believe the financial advisor report will come back, and it will go, it is, I believe, scheduled for next week's tax exempt review committee. And I believe, I'm not sure if we've received the financial package yet, but in any case, that's where it's at right now, is being analyzed for the but-for test. So with all TIFs or tax increment financing, regardless of this discussion of the use of the proceeds of the TIF, there's always this but-for discussion. You know, does the applicant incentive make sense? And there's a thorough financial analysis to determine the magnitude of that request. So I believe they'll be taking that aspect forward to the tax exempt review committee, just as a normal process like we do all TIFs. And then I think the hard discussion item will be brought back for the City Commission and to deliberate about what to do next with that.
Ken?
Thanks, Nicole. I think from the neighborhood, the Roosevelt neighborhood's perspective, I just happen to have notes that I jotted down from previous kind of discussion about this. And I think if I were to sort of share where we're at, there was some reluctance for us to just kind of jump in and approve. First of all, we don't have that, capacity to prove anything. But I think that there was some lack of confidence on our part as far as and clarity, I think, as far as how the TIF would ultimately benefit the neighborhood as far as any set-aside funds. At the point of our discussion, it was mostly hypothetical, and obviously we did talk about what parameters there are as far as what can even be done. I think we're looking at the possibility of, Jim, I believe, had suggested somewhere in the range of 500,000, which you're looking at maybe 3 homes that would be raised. And of course, our wish always is that houses aren't raised and that they're rehabbed instead. So that's some of the concern we have. And I think what we'd be interested in is seeing some strengthening of the incentives to restoring rather than destroying homes. So I think that's a quick summary of the perspective that from what I can speak to as far as the neighborhood. And I don't know.
Jim, did you have anything you'd like to add to this? Jim Laskowitz, you've been very close to this topic.
I think Ken summed it up pretty well. And, we had a neighborhood meeting roughly a month ago. Jim Gilmore did present to us at that meeting some possibilities. And as Nicole said, that really all that can be done with the TIF is to demolish homes, acquire property, and I think there was a clause in there for public space such as sidewalks and underground water retention. So I think from the neighborhood perspective, we just did not feel that this was a very good use of those funds. We do not want to see more properties raised in our neighborhood. As a matter of fact, we'd rather see properties rehabilitated. And so I think it's a misuse of public funds to use those funds in such a way. So we wanted to explore rehabilitation as an option, and that's just not in the cards apparently. So we voted unanimously as a neighborhood association to not support at this time such a TIF, and I don't think that will change. We were not in favor of this project in the first place, as you remember, and so for us to be asked to support this was just really difficult, and so we made that vote, and that's where we stood. And going forward, I guess we'd like to see how can the city help us rehab homes, and secondly, how can we get better enforcement of our existing ordinances that we have already on the books so that these properties do not become in a condition where they have to be blighted. So, we're seeing a lot of developers in our community that are taking advantage by purposely blighting homes and blighting properties so that they can gain this advantage and say, look, city, we've got blighted homes, we need to tear them down. And that's really got to stop. I guess that's my main message, is that we need to stop that practice. But going forward, I don't know what the solution is on this particular project, but I would like to say that I think we need to find money to incent people to rehab homes, whether it's private owners or developers, and get these homes back into the hands of people that could use them. And we're seeing that affordable housing is a big problem in our community, and this is really not being addressed properly. So it seems that we're taking the time to demolish homes rather than to find affordable housing for families. And that's really what we want to focus on, that positive aspect of how we can improve our community. Thank you.
Jim?
Jim.
If I understood, land acquisition is something we could use the TIF dollars for?
I'm not 100%, I'm sure on that. I would have to reference the Century Code.
Well, my question, and maybe have somebody research it, could we use those TIF dollars to acquire properties in the Roosevelt neighborhood and then contribute them to the new community land trust?
And that's exactly what Jim Gilmore was suggesting. It could even be some of the new townhomes that Jim Moore, our Roars Development, is looking to build on this this block. I think there's a handful of townhomes that are part of this development proposal or project, and could some of those go into the CLT on initiation, basically?
Yeah, well, I was actually thinking buying some of these other existing homes that, quite frankly, are turning into blighted properties, donate that to the community land trust. Obviously, they don't have to start from ground zero. They'll still have the rehab costs, but might be able to do two good things with one project.
Correct.
Yeah, that was my question too. When I heard you say it was acquisition, but not acquisition and demolition, did you have to demolish it if you acquired it?
You know, these are all specifics of the TIF program that I am not an expert in without the Century Code in front of me. And so I would defer to, if we want to have this conversation in more detail, to investigate as a new program development. And I think, quite honestly, this is what's confusing to the City Commission. I don't want to speak on behalf of the two sitting on the dais today, but what is confusing is developing a new program in tandem with a TIF application process is very complex. And so if we want to talk about this as a new program, I would suggest that we step aside and have this discussion outside of this application process, and recognizing, though, that we have an opportunity possibly, and I think that's all, I don't want to speak for Jim Gilmore either, but I think that's the opportunity Jim saw that he wanted to, in talking with some of the city commissioners and the tax exempt review committee, saw. And so he was just kind of trying to strike while the iron was hot.
Mayor?
You know, this is where sometimes we get confused. A good deed is not really interpreted as a good deed. The TIF applications in front of us have probably passed the but-for test, but normally that money goes back to the developer. So John's been pushing stuff for the neighborhood, and what else can we give back to the neighborhood? It was a very difficult discussion to get the final project in front of us, and very hard for the neighborhood as well. So one of the thoughts was, why don't we take 25% and give it back to the neighborhood and let the neighborhood do what it wants with? I think what we found out is we can't do rehab homes was the thought. Rehab homes, do stuff for homeowners, do whatever. And I think Jim is still researching that. To your point, Jim, yeah, if we buy a home and then build back up or do whatever we want, what we're trying to do is build a fund for the neighborhood. Now, the neighborhood study may came up with different methodology of doing it. This was kind of one of these things that was, hey, could we try this? And where Nicole is right, is oftentimes just like the land trust, when you see all the study that goes into it, you suddenly discover, this isn't quite as simple as we thought. But the idea is to give the neighborhood some choices of what they do with that. And then how do you decide, you know, maybe I like my home and it's fallen down, I don't want to do anything. You know, does the neighborhood go in and say, hey, Charlie, would you consider, we've got a free program and we'll fix up your house. It'll cost 20 grand and we'll take care of it. Or, you know, how you do that. It's delicate sometimes when you have a little old couple that doesn't want to do anything. They think their home is fine. But I think what it should do for the neighborhood is maybe it should engender a discussion of, if we had money, what would we do with it? Or how would we handle it? And how much money do we need? And you could buy for the land trust, or you could rehab homes. What I think Nicole doesn't have is federal funding to fix up homes. So we don't have some of the pots we used to have to grab some money to do that. But John Strand, also as a commissioner, has come and said, Tim, can we find some money just to put it in a pot that we could utilize in the neighborhoods? So we're hoping the neighborhood study will clarify that, or what the needs are. What I hate to do is fund something and then you guys can't spend it. I mean, either neighbors don't want it or you don't have a function or a method of making that money go to homes. So I think what this should spark, John, is a discussion of, okay, if we had a fund of $500,000 to $1 million, how would we use it? What would the criteria be? And do you have to prove how much income you have? If I come in and put $20,000 fixing your house up and you sell the house and make money, you know, some of the people are renters and, you know, maybe they'd love it if you fix their house and then they'll sell it for a profit. I mean, all those little nuances of life that come up in doing this. What we really want in the neighborhoods is, if the city puts some money into certain areas, where would we put it and what would the criteria be? We're just trying to find some funding out of the TIF. That's, you know, the TIF is a TIF. Normally, it'll come out of the but-for test on this one is the interest rates they make if they don't have a TIF are low, and if it comes into this other area, it comes into where it's supposed to be in market. So you'll find that most of the TIFs, typically, because of cost of everything, do come through as qualifying. But I think it's a great discussion to have, and I think what we should try to get out of that, the positive thing is, what things would we like to fund, or what things do you think, John, would be a good use of community grant funds or whatever we want to do? But I would see it as, you know, this case aside, let's try to figure out what we would do if you had some funding into the neighborhoods. And how can we, you know, if there's a special program to rehab homes, if there's a special project. We did storefront funding years ago. 15,000 was all it was, and you can see downtown Fargo looks pretty nice. That 15,000 went a long ways. And when I drive around the neighborhoods, yeah, I see some homes that would really, you plugged a little money into them, they could look very nice. So.
In the perspective of process, this is, I don't know, maybe tax exempt review committee maybe met today, I'm not sure.
No, we meet next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
So they will vet this, this but-for test, TIF request for the developer. Nicole or Mayor or Michael, how do we interject into that process, this community discussion? Will that happen at that table? Do any of you know, or?
Well, the confusion we have on the TIF committee right now is it sounds like Roosevelt doesn't want the money, so then that's necessary to pursue that to give them 25%. And that's, I don't know if we need clarity of what you could use that 25% before we go forward. You know, I would see it as, if we could do something with that meets the neighborhood's needs, would we still want to pursue that? But that, you guys would have to figure that out next week, basically.
And I'm not sure it's safe to say they don't want the money. I think it's safer to say this project runs in the face of what they stand for in their neighborhood. Where I see this is us trying to figure out if we can make some lemonade for the neighborhood with this on project unfolding. Can we somehow maybe come out with a gain for the neighborhood as opposed to just what they'd perceive as a loss? And it's not, we can't presuppose where this will land. We don't know this will pass through tax exempt review. We don't know that it will pass through the city commission. Jim Gilmore and the city have come up with this idea, and I like the notion of embracing this concept of a scattered TIF or TIFs, that if we can find ways to bolster our neighborhood needs. So that's why we brought this to community development today, so you all know this is a new topic. And of course, they're standing with their neighborhood. We'll see where this goes. I'm one commissioner who, and they know this, I might well go with this program if it's enticing enough to the neighborhood. So that's why we wanted to just get this on the agenda today. Anybody else, any just general feedback? The notion of the community land trust and donating and or getting property and at-risk blocks is very important. And so if we can see ourselves going toward that and be thinking how it could look, how it could work, what the role of the community development would be, how we partner with the neighborhood, it's all up in the air.
Nicole, we also have the neighborhood revitalization funding. Is this similar? Could this be used in a similar program?
Yes and no. The NRI program is through Gate City and loan program. It's basically a loan off management program through Gate City that we administrate on their behalf. But possibly we could set up a model. Again, I think there's lots of possibilities. We just need to figure out the what the factors are, and trying to create a program in 30 days is near impossible. We have the CDBG rehab program, and I will say there's many things wrong with that program right now. We're finding an average house takes at least $75,000 of rehab. Just a year to 2 years ago, it used to only be $25,000 for rehab. All the easy properties are done. Now it's a bunch of environmental review, rehab, affordability, all of those things. And so when we try to create a more robust program about 6 months ago with Gate City Bank, I mean, we try to split the math upside down and backwards and bring in other overseers, and you cannot, and the print was too fine of a print for you to see on April's pro forma, you cannot do it without losing at least 50,000 and 25, 50,000 a house. And so you need to figure out how you're going to finance that loss and where that loss is going to be. And then most people aren't fixing up their houses because they're on a fixed income. So they don't even qualify for the loan to begin with. And so you add all of those pieces together and it's really complex. And it's not something that can be defined in 30 days. I'm hoping with our core neighborhood plan, we can start to engage in this discussion. And as part of my staff updates, as we talk about our work plan, we first have to spend the CDBG money we have before we can start creating new programs. And so it's a vicious cycle that we're really excited to be working on.
Anybody else? Nicole, do you have any more on the core neighborhood topic?
Yes, actually, I invited, again, what I'd like to start using these meetings for when we don't have action items is you all represent, or the reason you're on this commission is because you represent boards and activities and agencies in our city. And so I really like to start to encourage some of that dialogue. And so with that, I'm putting Ken Yonoxon on the spot and asked him if he wanted to give us, I know the Core Neighborhood Plan, our Core Neighborhood Association has been active and working on a lot of initiatives. And I thought maybe just giving him the microphone for a few minutes.
Okay, so switching hats. And actually, one clarification, we actually refer to ourselves as the Fargo Neighborhood Coalition.
Thank you.
So, you know, and the core neighborhood idea is certainly something we're interested in. And you could say that the majority of the participants in the coalition reside in the core neighborhood. It's basically an association or coalition of a number of different city associations, neighborhood associations, and other interested residents. You know, it's pretty much open to anybody who wants to come. We basically have monthly meetings where we try to invite other stakeholders in our community. So we actually had April and the Area Foundation present. We've had the city a number of different times, representatives from the city come and talk. Some of the areas that we're, you know, I think our goal is information dissemination when necessary, but also be an advocate for neighborhoods in general. So it's not just Roosevelt or Hawthorne or Horace Mann, but it's what are the common issues that we encounter. You know, one of our key areas that we're interested in is obviously neighborhood preservation and affordable housing. We've also looked at the possibility of instituting some kind of a rental registry or licensing program. I think that we spent quite a bit of time on that, and it's right now sitting on hold, I think, as we kind of figure out some of the details and maybe try to engage the city a little more on that. We've definitely been very engaged with the land trust idea, very interested in that. Currently, we've set up a ad hoc task force, you know, really fancy name, for a group of people who are interested in the two initiatives are just getting off the ground with the city, and that's with the LDC review and the core neighborhood plans discussion. And so we've been having a series of meetings in different ways. I think during the joint meeting that took place here about a month ago, I wasn't able to attend, but I know that there was a quick high-level kind of talking points as far as where our priorities are. You know, another area that we're always interested in is ordinance enforcement. And more recently, something that's been kind of raised, we haven't done anything with it yet, but some interest in discussing the 64th Avenue overpass and how funding works with that, as far as particularly the sales tax. There's some interest in that, and I don't have much more details on that at this point. But anyway, so you can see there's a lot of different things that flow our way, and we try to prioritize a little bit based on some of the more pressing issues. We do have a pretty strong contingent of people from the Roosevelt neighborhood that participate. So, maybe sometimes that bubbles to the surface a little more than others. But what we are finding and what we're hoping to find is areas of commonality and issues, and yet also be able to be a voice for all the neighborhoods when it comes to issues as far as preservation of residential areas. So,
Do you have any questions at all for Ken or Nicole?
Well, I'd just like to comment on the 64th Avenue concern. Basically, the specials committee that's meeting for the last 6 months talked about specials and where they are, and rehab specials especially. And what came out of that is the kind of the consensus is to continue the same amount of rehab. So 64th Avenue doesn't influence rehab specials. So any neighborhood redevelopment or rechanges, basically the engineering team looks at all the different places in town, roads, everything like that. To kind of simplify it, we have a kind of a grading system throughout the city. It's 78%. Now, 78% kind of means what is how good is your road or how good is your infrastructure in your community. And part of ours is skewed a little bit because we've had a lot of growth in the south, so we have brand new roads. So then the north doesn't necessarily have brand new roads because they've been there for a while. But what happens is the engineers they go through all the neighborhoods and try to predict a little bit. By the way, we're going to do your road in 2 years, so you know that. Now what tips that up or down is maybe it deteriorates quicker, you got to do it quicker, or maybe it stays longer and we just put a seal coat on it, it lasts longer. But the 64th Avenue doesn't influence the core neighborhood specials, what happens in the core neighborhoods. Those things are influenced more by MetroCog meets, all the entities come together, said, what do we need for transportation? Everybody looks at it. There's 4 commissioners that look at that. That's usually long-term planning, and so that takes a lot longer. So I'm just saying the core neighborhoods, if you insert yourself into that, that's a little bit difficult because that's a real long-range planning, and we don't take money away from you on that. Now, the other question that could be asked, Ken, I think is good, is do we want to continue to build the way we build, or do we want to continue the infrastructure the way we do that? So do you still want the city to be fairly aggressive in keeping your infrastructure where it should be? The Specials Commission is looking at how do we decrease the cost of rehab specials, and I think you'll be pleased with some of the stuff they've come out on that. But they're continuing to look at different ways, and it's hard to say how fast Mayor Lindgren did not want to put money into infrastructure, and we got way behind. When we look at what we have to do with infrastructure, you have to spend a certain millions of dollars every year to keep up with infrastructure. And you can slow that down, but then what happens is then you get neighborhoods that aren't really happy about their streets and don't really like what's going on with their infrastructure. So I'm glad they'll weigh in on that. What I'd really like them to weigh in is how aggressive should we be? I mean, are you happy with the speed at which the city is doing it? Or do you want us to put more money into that? Prairie Dog Fund will allow us to probably have a little more money to do some of that. So I would think that this is the time to look at our infrastructure needs and try to best guide us to that. So, but I just want to reassure you, we're not pulling away from you guys in any way.
Anybody else?
And the other issue is we did a sales tax in 206, 209. We do 1 penny sales tax in the city of Fargo to help decrease cost of infrastructure and keep your utility rates down. So that's a critical part, and John and I have talked about that, is that you can increase utility rates and take care of some of your infrastructure, but it's been the sense of the community, no, we don't want that. We want you to keep utility rates down. You take that sales tax and you put a lot of it into your infrastructure. So that when you bring up sales tax, yeah, some of it goes to new, some of it goes to old, and it's distributed accordingly.
Ken, it goes without saying, your leadership and the voices that come from the community is really highly regarded. And it's important that we have that connect to our neighborhoods. So thank you all, and pass our appreciation back to your team that meets, one Saturday a month or so?
Yep.
At the Spirit Room, if I recall. But it's great that we have your voice and your partnership with us. Thank you for that. Okay, going forward, Nicole, do you have anything else on that topic?
No, and then I just wanted to, if you wanted to invite
Absolutely.
Carol, or I was just going to invite Carol to And you have a handout that should be along with your packet that hot off the presses, but Carol and the Downtown Neighborhood Association came forward in front of the City Commission about a month ago, presenting some points of interest that talks about kind of larger city policy. Carol also was a committee member as part of the Downtown in Focus plan, so we've worked with Carol and the Downtown Neighborhood Association closely, but we continue to have good dialogue, and so I'll just pass the floor over to Carol.
Thanks, Nicole, for inviting us. My name is Carol Schlossman. I'm the vice chair of the Downtown Neighborhood Association. I've been working with them since 2015 when we resurrected the Neighborhood Association due to some of the concerns about livability. We are participants of the Neighborhood Coalition, very active participants, and we really appreciate the city's ability to continue to focus and move forward. We are about leadership and vision and trying to get everyone going in the same direction for the long term, for a better outcome. People have asked what is my background, because oftentimes I work way behind the scenes. And so I have an MBA. I've worked in Washington, D.C. for several years in government relations with the chemical industry. I've worked for Great Plains and Microsoft, and I led a team with deep market analytics, partner analytics, and life cycle research of their products. I went out as a consultant about 15 years ago and haven't looked back. I continued to do market analytics for various organizations, as well as I have worked with a good friend of mine, Doris Hertzgaard, who had a market research company, and we have done market research for many years. I also have done strategic planning, et cetera. So that's just a little bit about where I come from. I'm not sure, I think you've discussed some of what we shared with the commission. I've updated it somewhat. I'm not sure where you would like me to start or summarize, so.
Carol, why don't you just give us from your perspective, the overview and the important salient aspects of it? Because many of these folks haven't heard your presentation at all.
Okay, the first thing is the downtown neighborhood truly focuses on the downtown master plan, and we are concerned about the city having resources put forth to include not only systems and structures to support the master plan, but also the people resources. As you move forward with core neighborhood planning, it's going to even become more important that there's some kind of overlay, so how that gets deployed over many years, as well as it's updated. These are living documents. They shouldn't be done once and set on the shelf, but need to be continually refreshed to be current. And so we encourage that investment in utilizing the plans. The public good and the use of TIFs, we talk a lot about public good when you use taxpayers' dollars or delayed dollars. And we do believe TIFs are very important for increasing property values. We encourage the city to use public good within those TIFs. The consultants strongly recommended, who worked with the downtown planning, that the city could be increase their negotiation for public good. The example we used is the parking ramp and the apartment building going up on 4th and Broadway, Kilbourne's building. And it is an opportunity to negotiate as the developer gets those TIFs, that some good goes back immediately to what is needed in that neighborhood or that community. And I see you're already doing that, looking at that for the Roosevelt. Similarly, we believe, and I saw it in the paper today, Mayor, that there will be a police office downtown. We had suggested a police substation as the police move out. We want to ensure that every development has green space, some type. Doesn't have to be burdensome, but if we need to increase the livability of downtown. It could be partial affordable housing, whether it's rental or for ownership. Public art is always a great option. So we definitely need some public bathrooms downtown. Downtown doesn't have them. They don't have mother stations. They don't have baby changing rooms. They don't have public drinking fountains, and we have a lot of activities around the downtown for the public and for families. And one of the values that the Downtown Neighborhood Association encourages is to look at how the downtown can serve families, and not just as a nighttime entertainment zone, but truly have livability and family-based support. Safety, although it's not directly under your purview, we believe that the policies of this, of the city and the ordinances that you oversee definitely impacts the safety. And so when you have homes that need rehab, or like we have, which I believe is on one block off Broadway right now, on the north end, we have 2 homes that have been fully boarded up for months. And that brings further grime. It's contagious. You know, somebody throws gum on the street, somebody else throws gum on the street. And so we encourage the city to set up procedures and policies that if there is a home that needs rehab or is condemned, or a building such as SARS, that they're taken down sooner than later. We have a specific example is behind 505 North Broadway. There was it was a derelict home, and it was constantly getting police calls, and I was one that would be calling. And as soon as they took down that building, it helped to clean up that parking lot immediately. And so we encourage the city to be more aggressive in either rehabbing or in getting rid of those poor facilities and moving on. One of the interesting things that I found when we were looking at rehabbing is, I don't know if you caught the New York Times article this Sunday on Minneapolis, got rid of single-family zoning, and which to me was a little shocking. But reading about it, their purpose was to transition over time to what could be more affordable housing and keep it still being an intimate neighborhood with ownership, as these millennials and the middle income is not keeping up with some of the costs of housing. So that would be a good article as a reference for you to refer to. Was jumping to the other area of accountability is we continue to push hard on oversight of the liquor licenses. We believe the majority of them are very responsible, and we certainly support people having a good time. However, we do believe that some of the very aggressive behavior that we have seen and leaks out from downtown into the neighborhoods is because of over-serving. And again, it's like gum on the sidewalk, it just attracts more. And so the more we have use our ordinances and use them appropriately, we believe will only enhance the livability of downtown and the core neighborhoods. We continue to support POLD. POLD is a place of last drink. Right now, when the police track a disturbance, they record where that disturbance is happening. It does not link back to perhaps the place of service. POLD would track that, and it's just one more push button that you can put in a scorecard for license oversight. And it's put into place by other cities and other states as a preventative measure, so that there can be measures taken with establishments who are not adhering to ordinances, that they can have a chance to adjust their practices before any penalties come down the pike. Our big focus with you is on middle income and workforce affordable housing. We are targeting as just the neighborhood association, and it's a little bit higher than what April brought forward, 35 to 75,000. And I know there were some questions about the numbers used. And if anyone in the city ever wants a demonstration of the Tetrad analytics that we use for projections in the marketplace, I would certainly give that demonstration to you. 2010 census data is not enough to keep up with the very fast changing times. And so when you look at what the city has posted on their website for the numbers of people living downtown versus what they have projected since 2010. They are very different. We have over 4,000 people living downtown, and when you look at the number of people who are between 35 and 75,000, it is more than half of the households. This is not individuals, these are households. And 31% citywide. That's a tremendous opportunity when you look at, just say a quarter of 3,000 households, or you look at 31% of almost 60,000 households. That's a lot of people who need affordable housing.
And Carol, I was going to ask a little bit about the data, because I'd like to merge the planning department with you and your data so we can have objective things we can follow yearly. Because downtown is changing very fast.
Yes.
And you're exactly right on that. And we get different statistics thrown at us, of how many houses, how many apartments we need downtown. The question in the city right now is how many apartments do we need and how much growth do we need? And then we have concerns that people who are downtown will be pushed out because the rents will go too high. And the downtown will suffer. It's had great growth, but are we going to get into a recession? So the only thing I would talk to Nicole about, the data just seems a little different than what we've seen before, and I just love to verify your data. But if we can then measure that yearly, are we making progress or not? Because commissioners are always asking, are we making progress downtown, or we're not making progress downtown? Do I need another apartment building? I know there's 2 or 3 more developments that are coming online that we're talking about, and it's always hard for us is, do we have enough? I mean, you see a letter to the editor today, oh, we've got way too many apartments, and initially the vacancy rate went up and now it's coming back down. And yeah, they probably overbuilt for a long time, but we're still growing at 2,500 people a year. So City of Fargo is growing every year, West Fargo is growing, and so is Moorhead. So your figures, what I'd love to do is just to have that data that helps us to know what the market is and what we need. Because you put in here, I think some of the kids could afford some of the rent and the stuff we have in the apartment area. And some want the amenities of walkable, livable, green spaces you're talking about, so.
Correct.
That was a question.
I'll certainly get with April and give her that demo. So again, the 2020 census is going to be incredibly important for these analytics companies to update their baselines. And I do know that most developers across the country use these very progressive systems for their own work. When you look at affordability and the number of homes available in Fargo, it's pretty abysmal for those that are seeking home ownership. We believe as a downtown neighborhood association that there is some great enhancements to the city when you have ownership. There's research out there, it's easy to find. The National Association of Realtors, of course, they're a little biased, but they have a strong research arm, and they look at what some of those enhancements are. Children growing up in ownership homes tend to have higher education achievement. There's more civic engagement. The value of people's life funds, their equity goes up. So all of that goes into thought leadership. You have to balance it against what is the market going to drive. Now, Minneapolis decided that they believed that 50% rental was too high, and we have higher than that. In downtown, it's closer to, per the numbers drawn from Tetrad, is 85%. So having to balance demand, the cost of building, this is a numbers game. And so having good numbers and crunching the numbers and starting out slow, testing the waters, I really do think that we're going to find affordable housing is going to be one of the keys to long-term sustainability for not only the downtown and the core neighborhoods as we step that density down into the neighborhoods, but also for the entire community. Questions? I have a lot in this document and it would take too long, so.
Anybody at all?
Thank you.
Carol, this is really great information. And I just want to thank you for sharing with us. I hope you're available for us to call on, as a resource. You're volunteering your services with our planning and development, community development already to start with this data exchange, but let's keep this communication open and don't hesitate reaching out to us.
Sounds good. I'll connect with April.
Okay, thank you.
Or
Anybody else
Nicole,
before she's
sorry.
done?
I just wanted to
Linda.
emphasize something that she said, which it relates to the Minneapolis zoning. As our households continue to get smaller and smaller, and we have single-family zoning everywhere, and you don't need it, and then we always wonder, why are these old people not moving? Because they don't have something that appeals to them, and the market will react once they figure out what the problem is. So we have to simply get that information out that and builders are paying attention, but some of the planning, when we do the new neighborhoods, lots of single family, and we don't have that, what they call the missing middle, which is triplexes and old-fashioned duplexes, which would enhance the old neighborhoods too. If we rebuilt what was there that's functionally obsolete, but make it new electrical, plumbing, no lead-based paint, it would enhance the neighborhood and still fit that price point for the people that can't afford a big brand-new house, but they want to live in the older neighborhood. It's all a function of size and how expensive it's going to be, so appreciate that. We need to make sure that people realize that small multi is not a bad word.
And that topic, the missing middle, is becoming a real common discussion point across the country with cities, and I think we're going to be wrestling with this. In Minneapolis, other cities, I want to say Portland, have gone to what they call inclusionary zoning. There's 500 and some cities that have gone to incorporated inclusionary zoning, and that addresses, as I understand it, the missing middle. So you might have what ordinarily would be a small single family home in an inner core city, and you might add accessory dwelling units. You might be able to take it up to fourplex. So single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex, or any of those mixes with accessory dwelling units which are built onto the property. These will challenge us in our theories, or how we look at our neighborhoods, but it'll also address the issues of how do we get affordability and accessibility into housing for folks. So we have a lot of work ahead of us.
The core planning, when you get the public input, I think we were well educated when we participated in the in-focus planning, and people need thought leadership to help them get over their vision of what is to what can be. And so I'm very excited that the core planning is going forth.
Thank you, and I'm sure, Nicole, your department's very happy we're getting these processes going forward. And while I'm at it, I'm happy to announce Nicole has a full department now. She's been dealing with a lot of staff issues, filling positions, growing folks into their appropriate slots, and so it's great that you're running on all cylinders now.
Yeah, I think as of, we were joking yesterday at 9 a.m., we're 1 hour into fully staffed after a year and a half of various position moves. So we have Kylie's return from maternity leave, and I wanted to introduce Karen Flum. She just moved to Fargo from the East Coast. She's a recent graduate in Master in Community Planning. She's originally from the area. However, after she went to U of M under undergraduate, she moved to the East Coast, worked in the housing area and in community development for about 10 years before returning to school, and just recently graduated. So she has a strong focus in policy and housing, and also previous work experience. So we're thrilled to have her on the team, and she is on day 2. And so but she is from the area originally, and so we're excited to have her on the team. So I just want to introduce Karen. You'll see her more in future phases. And in terms of staff updates, since we're running up against the library board's meeting, I will send you an email with some various staff updates, and they're more just updates on CDBG and some other activities. So.
Great, and thank you, Nicole, and good news on your department. Mayor.
Yes, Bruce, could you look in those 2 properties Carol mentioned today? You talk about North Broadway that are in blight?
Oh, yes.
Could you look into those for us, please?
Sure. Okay. On one last note before we conclude today, and last night the mayor advanced the reappointments of Sam McDonald and Linda Klebe to the Community Development Commission. So welcome again for another term. And John Gunkelman is now chair of the Planning Commission. So you're replacing Shara and will be sitting at the table as the head of the planning department, planning commission. So welcome to you too. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order? I'm not sure we'll meet in July. We'll decide. We're going into a quieter phase, but we'll keep you apprised. It was important we get us all updated today on some of the activities that are unfolding. One last call. Anything else for today? If not, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all.